Doo-doo, biddle-doo, bum, zabba-doo-doo-doo, diddle-doo-doo-doo, doo-doo-doo, Smirky inside. Ba-doo-doo-doo. Look, I put words in it this time. It's very exciting for people. Hey everybody, how you doing? Well, how you doing? I am Curt Covert. I'm the owner of Smirk and Dagger Games, and thanks for joining us. I have with me tonight James Fernhaber. So we're going to be chatting back and forth about games and game design and Tesseract especially. So James, say hey.
Hey everyone, I'm the designer of Tesseract, here to answer your questions.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to get the comment section loaded up here as people start filing in. I'm sure they'll shout out and say hi. Please do that, by the way. Be sure to say hello when you pop in so we know you're here. And I'm gonna have some warm-up questions, but this is really intended to be kind of a conversation, not just between James and I, but also between you and James and I. So put any questions you have in the chat, and we are going to answer those as we go. It's Jim Black. Hey there, Jim. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. And let's see. And James is here. Terrific. Well, thanks for saying hello, everyone. Yeah, it's been kind of an exciting week over here. I'm pretty sure this is your first Kickstarter, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. It's so exciting seeing like just all the comments, all the good reactions to the game, and just like, every new stretch goal, I'm like, yes, we made it.
Absolutely. Terry, hey, how are you doing? Good to see you. All right. So here's kind of the first warm-up question as people kind of like start filing in. James, so why don't you, if you would, just like tell us a little about yourself and your background, like before you got into game design, like what is it that you do and love?
Sure. Yeah, well, I graduated from an art school, and I am a freelance illustrator for most of my time during the day. So I usually do I illustrate book covers and like editorial articles. But in the spare time, I do game design stuff in the Philly game design community. So, I always had an interest in game design growing up, and it just so happened that art was the thing that I went to school for. And I've really tried to like fuse those two passions together. So I love that some of my design work made it into the final art of Tesseract.
Oh yes, and proudly, by the way. I was like, that's one of the things that drew me over to your table. But so now you said illustrator. Now I've seen a lot of your graphic art. Are you also a fine artist as well, or is it more kind of just graphic?
I would say, I don't do like fine art in the sense that like I'm not interested in making like art that's like emotional or like bearing the soul. I see my work more sitting aside like design markets. So like I work with clients, and I love that collaborative process. Like I see myself as providing a service, like illustrating someone's story or like book cover. And I think that that's like really what draws me to illustration, commercial art. Exactly. But if you're interested in my work, you could Google me. My portfolio is thankfully the first one on the page. I have a rare name, which helps a lot with that.
Yeah. Well, so I actually have kind of a similar background, though, less in illustration, but I came up like filmmaking and graphic art design and promotion. So that's kind of been a lot of my focus. But I do the same thing. It's like I love to brief. If a client could give me like here's what we need to solve, and I could go and do it. Man, that was like a dream. And it's different, right? When it's your own thing and you got nothing but a blank piece of paper in front of you, that is a challenge, right?
Totally. Yeah. No, the hardest part is always like between the jobs, keeping the portfolio fresh. You have to just generate the content from yourself, just like what's inspiring, what's interesting to me right now. And I find it so much easier working with a client who's like, here's the book, here's the story. It's about these kids. They go to a castle. It's great. There's dragons. And I'm like, awesome. I can do that. But when it's just me, it's like, oh my gosh, so many directions.
Yeah, and we're actually going to get into your inspiration for Tesseract in a bit, but I'm going to wait for a couple. Like, I'm going to give it just a little bit more time for people to show up. So while we're here, obviously we are both gamers as well. So what are some of your favorite games, or what have you been playing recently? And by the way, people in the chat, please chime in on yours as well. And if you need a minute, James, I will tell you, like, I've been still diving into like Clank. I still love,
Mm.
but I love it with like the asymmetric adventures that you can get with it, which is really really cool. Oh, someone just shouted out Shobu. Hey, thanks. They say it is one of mine, and they now want a high end Shobu. You are not the first to ask for high end Shobu. That is something that I've been thinking about with like something like more jewel tone stones, or like we even thought about like doing like maybe like a cyberpunk version with gears or something. It'd be kind of cool. Um, and let's see, anyone else out there? We got some people just signing as Facebook users, so it's hard to see your names there. But Koa wood board, onyx and quartz stones. Ooh, wow, that would be really amazing. Terry says they've been playing Tindea, and this week played Star Wars: The Clone Wars for the first time. That's that new one that was built on a different engine, right? What was the other game that?
It's using the pandemic system.
That's what it was.
Yeah. I really want to play that because I love that series. And honestly, it sounded a little more exciting than Pandemic to me because of the dice roll mechanic. Just seems like so exciting.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And see, Rick is out there as well. So, what kind of things have you been playing right now?
Hmm. Well, uh, I mean, my partner and I play a lot of Jaipur,
Hmm.
and the fast trading, like it's one of those games you can just play over and over, like just another round, another round. So that one's high in my books. And then I played Inish for the first time at
Oh,
like a
did you?
board game group, and I was like, holy cow, this is like blowing my mind. It was like everything I wanted from a territory control game, but like wrapped up in such a simple, like clean package. And it's like it was so short compared to games like Risk or uh, these other titles that just like feel like they stretch on, like eat the whole evening.
Yeah.
As soon as our first game was over, we were like, again? And we all just like played it and like had a new perspective on it from the first game.
Yeah. Jim Black is out there saying Cat in the Box. Oh, I've looked at Cat in the Box. That looks fascinating. That's the trick taking game where like there are no suits until you set them. It's a
Whoa.
pretty it's pretty neat looking. Scout, Valley of the Kings, and the Night Cage. Nice. Yeah, actually, I think a lot of people pulled out the Night Cage for spooky season. Honestly, I thought Night Cage was going to end up being a spooky season game or relegated to, but it really hasn't been. People have been enjoying it throughout the year, which has been wonderful to see. Cool. So yeah, I think the other thing I've been playing, I went Kickstarter crazy and did the Dice Throne Marvel thing. So got that big massive Gigundo box, which has been a lot of fun. And takes a while to get through all the characters, so you feel like you got a lot of value in there.
Totally.
Brad's Betrayal at the House on the Hill, another good spooky season game.
That
Nice.
is one of my favorite games.
Is
Like,
it?
yeah, really. Like, I feel like some people really hit a block with it because it's not as strategic as they want.
Yeah.
But I love how it almost like verges into role playing game territory. Like
Right.
the stories that come out of that game, if you're not too invested in winning, are just, I feel like almost unmatched in other similar types of games.
That's kind of neat. Yeah. I think one of the ones. Well, actually, this is a. So there's a game that absolutely like is part of my DNA, and it kind of like I've always credited with getting me to where I am today, which was Tom Jolly's Wiz War.
I don't know that
Which
one.
well, I mean, it's it's a nugget from another time, and man, it was one that I I was so jazzed to get it in my hands, back in the 80s. And it was such a nasty take, that game. You're sealing other wizards behind walls and just blasting the heck out of them. It is ridiculous fun. But honestly, that kind of set the path for me going forward in terms of, hey, for 14 years, I did nothing but backstabbing games. And that game is a good part of why. Now, are there games or designers that have had a large influence on you?
Hmm. I actually, I mean, so the first hobby game that our family ever got and played like over and over was Carcassonne.
Oh yeah,
So, like, I guess that game was what like led me down the path of like really uh like exploring more games. But for a long time, like I always had the designer itch. Like my brother and I hacked Monopoly a million times, like never made it any better. We made our own asymmetric factions for Risk. Um, but it wasn't really until like after I graduated that I was really introduced to like a wider range of like what modern board games have to offer. So
yeah.
I feel like a lot of my influences from like the people in the Philly game community, like Henry Audubon and Alex Knight,
Yeah.
um, John Perry, like all these people, like we get together at like playtest nights, and like just the ideas going around are so great. So I feel like it's more, it's not so much like specific games that have influenced me as like the people that I'm around.
So that's really great. In fact, I've got a lot of those kind of resources too. I'm out here in Connecticut, and there are lots of either player communities or designer communities that I tap into, either to showcase games, or there's one designer group where I'll go and we'll just each share our designs with each other and kick them around. And that's something that's pretty amazing about this industry, which is unlike so many other industries, including, by the way, the game industry, more on like the non-hobby side, where everything is so tight-lipped. You don't talk about what you're developing, and you certainly don't play it with anybody. So yeah, and I honestly, I love that openness and that collaboration that comes from the community.
Absolutely.
Let's see.
There is no saving Monopoly, that's for sure.
Well, so all right, here's the thing. I understand that Monopoly gets a lot of flack, but here's the thing: almost no one plays Monopoly correctly.
True.
If you actually read the rules and you auction any property that you don't, that if someone doesn't buy it, it goes to auction immediately, and the lowest bidder gets it, and it speeds the game up like crazy. And so I feel like, I mean, it's still a rolling move. I'm not gonna defend it that hard, but
I was gonna say, we really going down this road?
All right, so
uh,
we got a great question from Brad, and he asks us, how did James and Kurt find each other to start Tesseract? Well, of course, it didn't start with James and Kurt. It started with James, but James, you wanna field that one?
sure, yeah. I mean, so I started Tesseract pretty much the Christmas or like winter before COVID. And so all throughout like the lockdown and everything, it was kind of like my passion project that I just like, I kept showing up to the game groups that were like springing up everywhere, and put a lot of time and energy into like the testing and uh, all of that. And so I think it was about a year after that that I signed up the game, after I felt it was like ready uh, to finally pitch. Like it was to the point where I was making such small changes that it was just making the game different. And I was like, okay, I need to talk to a publisher to see what they want out of the game. And so I signed up for a pitching event, speed pitching, where it's like you're matched with, you know, 10 different publishers over the course of an evening for 7 minutes each, and you've got your game, and it's all loaded up on Tabletop Simulator, and you've got like just 7 minutes to tell them about it. And that's how I met Curt.
That's true. Now, obviously, that's where I step in, and I have that same memory, and I've done a number of those. But I'd love to get your senses. I've always been on the other side of the table. What is that process like when you've got 7 minutes and you are going from publisher to publisher to publisher as they pop into your room every 7 minutes? How is that?
Oh man, it was stressful. I feel like it was one of those things where you have like 2 or 3 minutes between each one for like a little self-evaluation of like, oh, that one didn't go well, or like, oh, I'm going to say that better next time.
Yeah.
And but it's cool getting to see everyone's different takes on it, and pretty quick I think people make a judgment on whether your game is for them or not. I could tell pretty fast whether a publisher was interested. So
Yeah.
I tried not to waste their time, and just talk about them as a publisher and see what they were interested in, like for the future, like if I have other designs, to know what types of games they look for.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, obviously the publishers, they know games pretty darn well, and they know what connects with them. So you can kind of get a sense pretty quickly. I think you're right about that. But on the other side of the coin, man, what a great opportunity speed pitching is, because I mean, at a convention, it's super hard to really get anyone's time, and something like this really provides an opportunity to get a taste of a lot of different games. It allows you to kind of pitch face to face rather than just like send a sell sheet, and what a difference that is to try to get a sense of what that game is like. I actually love the speed pitching events. I get to see so many new designers, check out so many really interesting games, and man, it's I just find it exciting. And of course, that is where we met, and I first saw Tesseract. Let's see, what do we got here? Curt, what was about James and Tesseract that made the cut? Okay, so that's another great question. Well, I think like people are experiencing now, looking at the game on Kickstarter. Um, I think one of the first things that was the table presence, right? That's the first thing that brings you in. You see this cube of 64, dice. Or actually, at that time, they were just big wooden cubes, right? Right, James?
Yep. Yep. They're 1 inch by 1 inch, hand
Yeah,
painted with Sharpie drawn
yeah.
on.
They were pretty massive, and there was no platform. It was just
Mhm.
flat up on the table. But at that size, it didn't matter. It was like, whoa, what is this? And of course, those symbols, like, again, kind of kudos to you and your design sense. Uh, the You know what? I'm actually put this up behind us because it's pretty cool. So these are the pips. If you haven't seen the dice, these are them. And as spacey and cool as these dice look, it's really just like numerals 1 through 7. And if you count the pips, you'll see all the different numbers there. So 1, 2, 3, etc. But man, what an impact that has. It's like, oh, I want to touch those. I want to pick those up. And so that's really, really cool. So that was the first thing that drew me over and got me interested. But and I've said this to a lot of people, as amazing as the table presence is, what I loved about this game was the high level of collaboration, and the really interesting mechanics. I mean, when you see a whole bunch of dice, you're like, oh, it's probably going to be pretty random, but it's a dice manipulation game. There's only just a little bit of dice rolling as like kind of the boom effect, but for most of it, you are really tightly trying to control those cubes and their values to make it work, and you're doing that across like everyone's turns. So I'm looking into other people's turns, and we're all working together on everything. So, and that was I think that's what really sunk the hook. I played it once, and I was like, we have to talk. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the phrase I remember you using, after you were like, I think I want to sign this, was you said you thought it had kind of like an X factor, like something out of nowhere. And I feel like that was really exciting to me.
Yeah, and quite honestly, as publishers, we're always looking for games that have that X factor, that extra something that you can't quite quantify, but makes people go, what have you done here?" Right? That's the juice of a game that is going to do well. Is, if you can really get people interested, just looking at it or getting just a small taste of it, man. that really makes it much easier to sell the game. So Chris Canary writes, just in case James does not know, this has been easily one of the most talked about games amongst the instigators for Smirk and Dagger that I can ever recall. Oh, that's interesting. So that's my team of people who have been helping me for years at conventions, by the way. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm amazed that 230 plus have put in for the metallic dice. Yes, they
Me too.
have. We will get into that in a bit. All right, so let me get back to our faces here. Okay. Oh, let's see. Another tabletop test drive says, "Oh, now let's make a semi-precious stone version of Tesseract." Because the metal dice, they weren't enough, right?
We need to go more deluxe.
Exactly. Let's see.
This one's from my brother, Joe Fernhaber. Maybe a more granular question. Is there an easy mode for people who are new to strategy games? Hey, Joe, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
I think Curt and I spent a lot of time trying to dial in the difficulty to make sure that people of all like familiarity with strategy games could play at a level that they could have a chance of beating Tesseract. And so to kind of tie this into Brad's question, I think Tesseract is hard to win if you're like at the threshold of your skill level. And what we've tried to do is like easy is probably going to be a challenge for people who are new to hobby games. Someone who's just like picking it off the shelf, hasn't played too many things. I think that's going to give them a good challenge. And what we saw a lot at playtest conventions, at Unpub events, was a lot of people losing on easy. So that's kind of how, but they get very close. Like it was always like down to the last few turns. And so when we hit that spot, I felt like, okay, I think the balance is perfect. And from there, it just scales up. So I think on the other end of that, is Tesseract hard to win? I think it can be. Like, I think we have 4 difficulty levels. So I think hard is a real challenge. And then if you can master hard, we also have unfair after that. And I mentioned in the comments for the Kickstarter page, you can scale the difficulty further beyond that if you just have mastered Tesseract to that degree, where you start taking more and more cubes off the Tesseract and putting them in the primed area during setup. And then you can kind of play for high score, like how many can you start removed? So you can kind of always have a spot that's going to meet your skill level.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. Let's see. Oh God! All right. So Jim is like, as soon as he saw it advertised, he was hooked by the appearance. Right. That's what caught me, and the actual gameplay sealed the deal. And I think a lot of people are starting to see the gameplay now. If they haven't played with us at the various conventions we've been to, showing it off. Now Tantrum House has played it, and Becca had played it. Co-op Shop. So people are now starting to kind of see the game being played, and it doesn't really play like any other game that I can think of. So, man, well, actually, going back just a piece now. I mean, obviously, game design is a very iterative process, and this Tesseract is your first published game, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So we all have designed games that are like, half starts, and some never get out in public. So how many games have you crafted before you even landed on Tesseract?
Wow. Many.
All right.
Well, I mean, at least 4 or 5 like tested designs.
Okay.
Many more that I just like wrote down the ideas, thought through it a little bit more, and was like, okay, that doesn't need to see the light of day.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I had, even before Tesseract, I made a 2-player abstract game, and I brought that to Boston Fig, and people loved it. Like it got audience choice, but abstracts are so hard to pitch. Like no one wants to publish them. So I kind of just put that on the shelf and was like, well, I feel really good that like it got such a positive response. So I'm just going to like see what's next. I'll work on some other stuff. And Tesseract was really the one that like, I was so excited by the premise of it that like, I think that is what carried it through from like the start to, where it is today.
That's cool. Well, so By the way, somebody here has published 2 abstracts now, so you might want to show me that one.
I
But
certainly will. Yes.
let's see. So, question out. Terry is asking, were 16 millimeter dice an obvious choice right away, or were other sizes considered? Well, actually, as we mentioned, James, when he designed it, was 1-inch cubes, which again were massive and cool to look at, and were very tactile, by the way. But at some point, we had to look at like the production realities, and so the 16 millimeters were something that I kind of threw out there as, you know, is this something still manageable, still interesting? Does it still have enough table appeal? And the one thing that it does allow at that size, and it's a game where you really do have to be very aware of all the different sides of the Tesseract. And with big 1-inch cubes, you're either going to spin that around on the tablecloth, or in this case, you know, that's when I said, oh, you know what, I've got this. I found a terrific 4-inch Lazy Susan platform that will act as a turntable and perfectly fits a cube of 64 16 millimeter dice. So the combination of those two things, you know, was just it just worked beautifully. And then because what I missed, though, I missed the height that you used to have with those 1-inch cubes, and that's where the platform came in to kind of just pull it off of the table a little bit, so that, you know, it presented itself and said, you know, take a look at me. So that's kind of like how that all pulled together. But that was kind of like a, you know, kind of in the weeds once we were, you know, really taking a look at producing the game. And you have to make a lot of hard choices when you're trying to find out how you're going to actually execute the game and do it, you know, in a way that you think people will pay the price of the game for what you get in the box.
Yeah, my biggest concern was that no publisher would touch it because it had like 64 dice in it. So I was just glad that you were willing to publish it, like in any.
It is a challenge, my friend.
Yeah, I believe it. I don't want to be in your shoes at all.
Yeah. So yeah, and like I said, what the funniest part was, when I went out to prototype it so I could start taking it to shows and get people excited, I didn't want to have just like regular D6s. You know, I wanted to have something that looked as cool as what you had designed. And the cheapest way I could do it was to actually like etch in, you know, metal dice at 16 millimeter. Which, I mean, it cost me like $128 to actually have that done. But the crazy thing was, and all of a sudden people are like, well, do we get these dice? I'm like, no, I mean, it's not possible. It's way too expensive. It's like, yeah, but we could get them, right? It's like, you don't want to spend it, but we could get them, right? So, well, and here they are. People are, you know, I ended up finding a great way to get them done, and a solid third of people are going all in with those metal dice now. So they're gorgeous, believe me. But wow, I was really surprised. I never expected to offer those during the campaign. I know you didn't either. So
yeah, definitely.
All right. So let's see. How did you come up with the name and theme? Brad wants to know.
That's a good question. I think I might have said in the design diary that, you know, I started with this cube of dice, and it just, looking at it, thinking about the interactions, it just seems so alien. Like when all the dice are stacked together and you're just looking at the shape and the different colors and the symbols, it just looked like this bizarre kind of artifact. And that, you know, I just seen Arrival and I was like, that's it, you know. I made the connection and I was like, this feels like an alien artifact. And so it made sense that people were trying to deconstruct it. And as it became more solidified as a co-op, I was like, okay, it's a weapon. It's going to do something bad that we're trying to prevent as a team. And so it kind of took a more dangerous turn. But yeah, the name Tesseract, I mean, it was kind of just a pull from Marvel movies. The Tesseract being like the glowing super energy cube Um,
Which,
it
of
was a
course, is actually like a fourth dimensional avatar, right? It's,
right.
you know, it's a theoretical object that uh, but yes, popularly used in Marvel movies. Yeah.
Yeah. That I feel like that's the connection people make. But yeah, also it being like this construct shape of like a four-dimensional cube. That's where all of the like things of breaches and time dilation and like all these references to like I guess theoretical physics and stuff come in.
Yeah, and quite honestly, I think that's where we kind of got together. And interestingly enough, you said it reminded, when you looked at that cube, it reminded you of Arrival. When you first told me about this game in its theme, you didn't mention the movie, but as I was thinking about like the cover and everything, like Arrival is exactly, I was like, this is what we want to deliver. This experience, it's like Arrival. This thing comes and we have to communicate. We have to understand what's going on and interact with it. Starting from square one, and all the world's going to get together and try to figure this out with the top minds. And I think if anything, I might have helped like try to push it towards that fourth dimensional,
Mm-hmm.
avatar place. But yeah, I mean, already you had like such a cool vision for what this object was. But how did you start just stacking the dice in a cube of 64 anyway?
I don't even know. It was just so one of my very first designs,
Yeah,
I bought a giant bag of D6 in like 6 different colors, and those I was using them to track different numbers
yeah.
in the game. And I had all those dice lying around, and it was just like I was putting off packing for a trip, and I was just like messing around with them. I was going to bring a bunch of dice so that we could play like liar's dice and stuff. And so I was just having a good time. And after I stacked them all together, I was just like, whoa, like this could be a game here. Like I've never seen
Wow,
anything
that's
like
so
this. But
cool.
it was kind of just coincidental. Like it was just idle play.
Honestly, well, that's where inspiration comes from, right? All of a sudden, you don't know where all the different pieces are going to kind of like insert themselves, but then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's something here. And
Totally.
and once you've got that, then it's like, okay, now what do I do with it? There is something here, but what can we now, do? And of course, what you did was you found a really interesting way to manipulate all those cubes. And I think that is the core of gameplay that is really going to get people excited. The fact that there is very little dice rolling, that you're extracting cubes, you're removing them from the Tesseract, placing them in your lab, you're adjusting the up and down of value, and again trying to like eventually contain them in the matrix. So it's just it's interesting, and so many of the cubes, and I think it was both practical and interesting, I think, from a thematic point of view, that some cubes are just inaccessible. The fact that you have to have three open faces, with the top face being one of them, in order to like grab a cube. Well, obviously that really helps the game in terms of manipulating it, but it also creates like this center of untouchable cubes at the beginning of the game. You can see them, you can want them, but you're not going to get them right away. So that's pretty neat. Let's see. So got some other things out here. Oh my goodness, lots of people jumping in. Hey, hello everyone. I'm sorry that I've been ignoring your questions for a moment. Thanks for stopping by. Alex Nunez is out there. Hey guys, excited for the game. So I believe alpha gaming is a game problem, not a player problem. What does Tesseract do to prevent it? Ooh, that's a great question. And one of the things that I love about this game, hit it.
Yeah. I mean, so I feel like I tend to agree with you. I think alpha gaming is often a game problem, and there's a lot that designers can do to prevent it. And I think if it doesn't destroy, the core premise of the game, I think the designer should try and design for that, or to design alpha gamers like away from it so that it can't be run that way. Um, what I found with Tesseract is just that there's so many options on any given turn
Yes.
that it's really hard for anyone to say definitively, like, this is the best move. Like, we have to do this to win. And the coordination of like players as a team isn't so lockstep as games like Pandemic, where you have to like plan 4 actions for this turn, next turn, and the next turn to hand the card off at the right place. So, or else the whole game falls apart. Like Tesseract doesn't have that. It's a lot more flexible. Players can and often will have to change their plans based on what cubes get primed off the Tesseract, and how the dice land after a research roll to get a new card. All of those like shifts in the game state, I feel like, make it so that there's only so much that a player can boss around the rest of the table. Now, that said, of course, there's no hidden information in the game. So if players, don't feel like they can, stand up to an alpha gamer to say like, hey, like, this is my turn, leave me alone, like, or here's my idea too. Like, if they don't want to present their own ideas, it is possible for someone to take over the game and run over a player. But I feel like that is a player problem.
Well, so it's interesting. Now, obviously, both of us have play tested this game a lot with a lot of different groups, because I mean that's just the act of play testing a game. And one, I will say, in general, I have never really enjoyed co-ops for this particular reason, because I didn't want to be a pawn in someone else's game. But I think this game in particular, what I find fascinating and really engaging about it is that there is too much information. When you have a 4-player game, you've got both the research cards that you've collected. You've got 2 abilities on your researcher's card. You've got all the different dice, both in the actual Tesseract and the primed area, the containment area, and different angles that people are looking at it. And even that different angle created different perception. So all that taken in concert, you're going to miss something. And playing a solo game versus a 4-player game, well, you're essentially like nothing's changed about the game, but you have fewer minds helping to work that puzzle. And that becomes the challenge of the solo game, right? Is that you really need the input from those other people, the different insights and perspectives. And so it's a harder puzzle solo, even though you can control more. So I think that's just a fascinating tension and dynamic in this game that I think that's the most collaborative co-op. And I say collaborative co-op because collaboration really is the spirit of this game. And so often what I'll find is that rather than like one person controlling the game, there are 4 people helping on everybody's turn with an equal voice at the table. That's what I find most often. And I think that's just fabulous. And it just, I think that is, the brilliance of your design and the way that it executes. So kudos to you, sir.
Why, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. Brett, 64 dice, but no green tentacles. Yeah, no. The aesthetics of the metal dice, they look futuristic, alien, smooth, efficient, Spartan, perfect for the theme. Couldn't agree more. Well, and actually, I felt that way too about even just the standard dice. But you're right, the metallic finish goes that extra mile, doesn't it? I know. Denise Rabideau, how you doing? Dice Hoarders, they're obsessed. We got Mike is out there. Hey, Chris Canary, movie geek in me. It made me think of both S Darko and Cube 2 Hypercube. Oh, well, that certainly makes sense. Yep.
I can see that.
Yep. Jim also saying when stacked together, it looks like an alien artifact. Well, again, like I think that was the inspiration, James. That was like you said, oh my God, that's what it feels like. So
for sure.
So Terry's asking, the game didn't start as a co-op?
So it definitely did. It started as a co-op,
Okay.
but like when I first saw the cube, like I didn't have a game in mind yet. Like it kind of took over that trip to like kind of think through the implications of the cube, of the dice stacked that way. And I think that was what excited me, was like the co-op the cooperative aspect of like, if I see that you need a cube, we could talk about that, and like I can leave it alone and let you take it. Or, if you need one that's locked away, I can spend actions on my turn unlocking that so that it's accessible to you. I thought it was much more interesting, like kind of dealing with this shared resource as a
Hmm.
team rather than fighting over it. So yeah, it always started as a co-op game, at least as soon as I started prototyping anything.
Yeah. Now, I did have I did have one backer who wanted to know whether you could come up with a competitive version of the game. So you'll have to put your thinking cap on for that one. I was like, why would you? Like, it's so perfect as a co-op. but but he was super interested in that. But so let me ask you another question.
Sure.
What are some of the key strategies that the player should be thinking about as they approach the game? Now, obviously, a lot of people haven't played the game or only just kind of seen the video, so we'll have to be a little bit more 10,000 foot about it.
Sure.
But what are some of the important things that they really should be thinking about?
Yeah. So, great question. I think from watching playtesters, there's like three things that I see a lot of, like the groups that lose don't take advantage of a few like very
Hmm.
important parts of like the tools that like the team has to make progress. A lot of people don't pursue like larger sets and runs to get those higher value research cards, because they feel like the pressure of the timer ticking down,
Mm.
and so they just like get 3 cubes in their lab and fire one off into containment and just take the level 2 research cards. But often it's worth it to spend another action to like make a bigger run so that you can get a level 3 or even 4, because those powers are like hugely impactful,
Yeah.
especially since they don't take an action and you can save them for another turn. Uh, so I think it's definitely worth it if there's not an immediate threat, to build up those bigger sets and runs. Um, Secondly, some people don't optimize the ability to clear out the primed area, because one of the best
Yes.
ways to do that is when you contain a cube, you get to destroy a matching cube of the same color and value in the primed
Hmm.
area. And that is like the main way that you manage the threat of the game. So, talking with your teammates, planning who's going to take care of what, how you're going to kick those cubes out. Uh, that's like super important to staying one step ahead of the breaches.
Yeah. In fact, I've often found one of the key bits of information that someone would suggest to someone is like, hey, before you contain that 2, why don't you take the 3 in the primed area, roll it down to a 2 so that you can destroy it when you contain it? And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Thanks you for pointing that out. And like, yeah, and like, so that's not even like, that's not alpha gaming. That's just like, here's an opportunity. We should jump on that. And like, great idea. Thanks.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. So all right, I'm continue. I'm sorry.
No, no. I feel like that's one of those like light bulb moments for some players when they're like, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, yeah, I can." Before I do this, the sequencing. So, um, the other thing I was going to say is like a lot of people in their first game, they're dealing with all the new systems, all the rules of like a first time play, um, and they just totally overlook their player powers, like their character specific
Oh,
action and passive. And those are so powerful. And so if you're not utilizing your specific character strengths, it's going to be so much harder.
well, so interestingly enough, I think sometimes people look at those researcher abilities, and some of them can be harder to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "Oh, I'm not going to be able to do that." But quite honestly, that's the opportunity. You have to actually ask for help from other players to help get you there.
Mm-hmm.
I might need to start my turn with 1 cube of each color in order to have my thing go off. Well, I'm going to need other people's help to do that. And so don't ignore those things. Talk about those things with others and figure out ways that you can all optimize each of your turns. And again, that's one of those things like everyone has their own perspective on, what they can do or can't do. But once you start actually sharing information, you're like, oh, wait a minute, if I do this, then you can do that. And that's where some of the magic of the game really comes in.
That was one of my goals for the cooperation in the game. I wanted to make a game where players, as much as they were, putting their minds together, they were also asking for help, because like I
Yeah.
feel like that's one of the cool things that like cooperative games can help us with, like bring skills into our life, is just like
Oh,
asking for help.
yeah.
So like I don't know, I thought not many co-op games like give you that option, or at least like encourage that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
it doesn't.
And
You don't. You're not made to feel that way. But I think this one, yeah, I think there is definitely. In fact, we should probably address that in the rules, and call that out a little bit stronger, even.
yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Now, one of the things that I underutilized early on, well, there's two things that I didn't do, and I think these are two things that I know that you tried to remind me of when we were playing together. That you had said also that people forget to do these things. Um, One of which is the study action, where you
Hmm.
can take one of your research cards that you've earned, but study allows you to trade it in for one that's like double the strength of the next
Hmm.
level, right? And sometimes, there might be, all the cards have uses, but if you trade them up, you can get a lot more things going on. So that's one thing I think people should remember. But the other one, I I I think I was so used to doing co-ops where it's like more siloed play, where I was taking my turn and focused on what I can do, and I wanted to get cubes so I could contain. And the whole transfer action, where you can share cubes from my lab to your lab, or I can ask from a cube from your lab to bring it over to my lab, just totally underutilized that. And it's actually super, super important to manage cubes across all four of those labs if you're playing a four-player game, because otherwise everyone's taking cubes off the Tesseract, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, whoa, slow it down, guys. We're about to blow up.
Yeah, it's like all the threat events start coming up, and it's like we're getting
Oh,
overwhelmed. Yeah,
yeah.
no, the transfer action is definitely overlooked. Even just like if it's something that you can help someone like uh, contain a cube and clear out a prime cube like one turn sooner, sometimes that can be
Right.
the difference between a breach and like a safe turn.
Absolutely. So let's see. Alex, on the competitive mode note, has there been any thought on, or is there any room for, possible Tesseract expansions? Same question for Night Cage. Well, um, we have not yet talked about possible Tesseract expansions. That's not to say you haven't thought of any, have you?
I certainly, it's been on my mind ever since like this was at a finished state. I was like, man, but what would be next? If Curt wants
Yeah.
the second Tesseract. So I definitely have ideas. There's parts of the design that I would like to flesh out more, but I feel like
Ah.
didn't necessarily like warrant inclusion in the base game. Um, so I'm not going to spoil anything yet, but I have some cool ideas that I'm excited about.
Well,
So
that's good to know, sir.
yes, if there is room for that, I would totally be down to talk about it
Cool.
more.
All right. Well, and then I can answer the Night Cage piece. Yes, I've been working with CCR, uh, Chris, and uh, Roswell, and so we have been talking about. Well, we already did like a monster pack and little mini expansions, but we are trying to figure out like what happens. You turn the key and you end up where? What's you know maybe you don't escape. You go from one hellscape to another. And what does that look like? What new rules are in place, and how do you escape that new level? So that's the kind of thing I think we're thinking about. More than just like expansion, more like serialize. What happens next? So that's I think probably where that might go, a different standalone. Um, Terry's very excited about your expansion possibilities, so I'm also excited to see some of those. So, um, all right, let's talk a little bit about the base plates.
Sure.
And I mean, let's see. I'm just going to add this up to the stream here. So the Tesseract itself is sitting on top of a circular disc, and I don't know if I have anything that actually shows what the discs actually sit on, but there are a bunch of different symbols there. And talk to me a little bit about what those are and how they came to be and how that's changed over time.
Sure. Yeah. Like you said, like at the bottom, after you finish a column of dice on the Tesseract, and it's the challenge system is basically made so that it is going to chip down the columns. So you can slow it down sometimes. You can try and not take from the lowest column so you don't speed it up more, but they are going to happen. And at the bottom of each of those, there's going to be a threat event that's going to do something bad. And how bad it is varies based on what symbol it is. And the symbols are kind of established on that base plate. And those set the difficulty. As I said in the design diary, that was something that Curt kind of really pushed for. He was like, I want there to be something different down there. Because in the prototype I showed, it was all the same event. It was kind of
oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I almost forgot that that's the way it was.
Yeah, totally. That was something I feel like that came out of the collaboration of the development of Tesseract. Because at the start, everything was just a chain reaction. It's like you take off the cube, it reveals a thing that just tells you take off another cube and roll it into the primed area.
Right.
Everything did that. It was super hard. And it was also a little flat, there wasn't much texture to it. And Curt had the idea, let's vary it up. Let's put different symbols down there. Let's think of different ways that we can have the Tesseract lashing out at the players. And I was initially hesitant because I liked the minimalist, pared down design sense that I had going. But ultimately, I think it was the right call. It just made the game so much more dynamic, so much more exciting. And it gave us a way to more easily control for difficulty. So, based on their distribution of the symbols, based on where they're placed, because the corners always get revealed first pretty much every game.
Yes, right.
So how close the symbols are to the corners kind of is their general probability of being revealed over the course of the game. So higher difficulty levels put scarier symbols towards those edges.
Right.
So they're going to pop out earlier in the game, whereas stuff at the core is less likely to be revealed.
Okay. You say that. However, the other side of that coin is you are down like at the end of your wire, and all of a sudden one of those big nasty fissions or other things happened right towards the end of the game where you've already got like 5 different breaches and you're like, no, not now.
I love that too, though, because that's the easy mode. Like all those scariest symbols are right in the center. And I think that's such a great thematic pull. It's like you got to the core of the Tesseract and it's just like even scarier than it was before as its like central focus collapses.
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny. I had, if you had asked me when this started, what was on your original base plate, I honestly would have said we had 4 symbols down there.
That's so funny. That was one of the most I think important breakthroughs that we had was putting different stuff down there and deciding what those would be. I feel like totally changed the game. It made it so much more exciting.
Yeah, well, I guess because we've been play testing it now together, pretty much that way for a while. I credited you for it. So
I think I did come up with what they would be specifically.
Yes, yeah.
And then but that was only true for the first 4 because you wanted even more just for diversity for that second kind of set of symbols that
I'm a glutton for punishment.
Yeah. And so those were much more of a collaboration of you were like, wait, what about this? This could be really mean. And I was like, that's a little too mean, but let's try it.
Yeah. All right. So, let's see. Brian says they still haven't gotten a chance to watch all the videos and design diaries, but I backed Tesseract just based on the fact that I've enjoyed every Smirk and Dagger game so far. Oh, well, thank you so much. That is very kind. Yeah, I honest to God, I think most publishers are passionate about what they do and what they produce. But I really love when games just pop and make you feel something at the table, where the pieces kind of disappear and you're left experiencing the world of the game. So when games do that, and this one absolutely does that, um, that's what sweeps me up and gets me excited, and those are the things I tend to publish. So while none of the games that I produce are terribly similar, in fact, they're widely different in many cases, they all have that in common. So I think very often people who like one of our games does tend to find, a connection to a lot of things that we do. Um, Jim says, I love games with adjustable difficulty levels. I like to work my way up the levels. It feels like a great accomplishment to beat each one. Thoughts on that? Because we do have some of that in here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the fun things of uh, these types of solo games. Or, I mean, it also great as a co-op, but
Mhm.
uh, we've got 6 different difficulty levels at the moment, and you can scale that further. And I think Curt and I talked about including further variants that you could kind of play through those difficulty levels with a new variant, and it's going to introduce like a new challenge, a new kind of puzzle for you to wrap your head around. It's going to
Yeah.
kind of turn some of the strategies on their heads, or just give you a new consideration that you didn't have to deal with in base Tesseract.
Yeah, we've certainly tested a lot of different stuff, some of which was very, very broken.
Yeah, for sure. It started way too hard, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, what was your biggest challenge that you faced in designing the game? Thinking about the entire process, early through late.
I mean, we've been talking about it a lot, but I'm going to say balance. I think that
Mm,
that is the hardest part of designing a cooperative game.
yes.
In a competitive game, the players kind of balance each other. You only really have to balance any asymmetry in the components, and some games don't even have that. It's just kind of like what the other players are thinking. So, but a co-op game, it's like you have to make the system, exciting and tense, and there's no one at the table making that happen. It's just the rules
Yeah.
and the setup. So like, it's funny because like watching people play it, I'm always rooting for the Tesseract to win, because like as the
Yeah.
designer, that's me. That's
Yeah.
my game fighting back. And if it's creating like tension at the table, like I'm here for it.
That's
And
cool.
when they're like just beating up the Tesseract, I'm like, oh man, I should have made it harder. But often it's because they're playing it really well, and
Yeah.
I shouldn't take that away from players.
Yeah. Oh, and sometimes I will say the one bit of randomness in it is when you roll the primed area, sometimes the dice hate you and
Yep.
sometimes they spread themselves very evenly, and that makes a little bit easier game.
Yeah,
So
sometimes you roll all ones and you just kick them out of the primed
yep.
area. I would say that the other really difficult part of the process was there was a really big shift that I had to make in kind of the whole structure of the game when I realized like that the kind of the core that I had built wasn't working.
Mm,
Early in the process, you won when you took the last cube from the Tesseract. It was just a race to like take the cubes apart and destroy it.
right.
And it was such a slog.
Mm,
And so switching it so that when the last cube is removed, um, like totally upended the whole dynamic and like made the game much more exciting. But trying to find like how that whole new game looks when I knew like the cube itself was exciting, that took a lot of time, like just running through different ideas in my head of like,
yeah.
okay, what's going to keep the spark from this setup of these components, but like make it punchier and more fun. So I think the
Yeah.
long wait there was also a challenge.
Well, I can definitely see that. In fact, one of the interesting things, I think you called the kind of the Tesseract dissembling itself, the timer of the game. But while it is that functionally, what it doesn't necessarily feel like a timed game or you're against a clock in any way. But you always have it in the back of your mind. Yeah, we only have so many cubes left. We have to conserve them more now. We have to find ways like, when you complete a row and you can take a destroyed cube and put it back on, you're like, oh, yay, we need that. Thank you.
Yes.
So it's really interesting. And I think I think that dynamic, I'm glad you found that, because I think you're right. That is critical in the game. So this is, so you can put this into your thinking cap. Maybe come up with a campaign mode where you list out the challenges you've thought of one by one, and and you campaign, check them off as you go. That's kind of neat. Creating a storyline where X number of Tesseracts have been found, and you have to go and resolve each one, and each one has a different characteristic or some mystery to it. That's kind of neat.
I would love to do that. Like, I think I was pitching Curt on this, and I don't know how well it landed, but like, there's different ways that you can set up the Tesseract, and with the same base rules, just changing like how you set up the cubes, like without the sleeve, like just stacking them, can totally change the way the game feels, and just changing the win condition. At conventions, what I would do is you can also play with like a 3x3x3 Tesseract and shorten the game, change kind of the end game goal. Instead of containing one of everything, it's like contain like a 3x3 footprint on the containment board. And it's like you get a lot of the same Tesseract experience, but it's a little bit faster. So the idea of kind of assembling all of these different variable modes into a campaign or story, that's definitely something I'd like to do.
Yeah. And Joe's like, legacy mode.
Yes.
With different cards or restrictions. Yeah. Brian's, I really enjoy cooperative competitive games. You really do make them the best of both worlds. Oh, yes. Well, and like semi-co-ops too are very interesting. I enjoy those a lot myself. Expansion when you make the Tesseract a possible encounter in Cutthroat Caverns. All right. Now, I don't know what you're smoking over there, but that's crazy talk. Any chance on Kickstarter exclusives? So interesting. I always feel a little bit funny about pure Kickstarter exclusives. Like, if I'm going to produce something, I'm always going to have leftover of those things just to make sure the backers have enough. And I don't want to throw those things away. So, at the very least, I want to sell them at my convention booth if I have a few left over. So, like, Smirk and Dagger exclusive, absolutely. And I think the dice are a great example of that. But something you could only get on Kickstarter, I just hate throwing things away. So promising that is always a little hard for me. Plus, people on Kickstarter love it, but it breaks a lot of hearts out in the world, and I hate having that conversation too. All right, Tesseract versus Tesseract. Oh, Denise is like, all right, at a CN. Two teams playing against each other. Oh, at a convention, two teams playing against each other, one Tesseract versus another one. I don't know exactly what how that would work, but that's kind of interesting, isn't it?
I could imagine that as a race. Like, you're racing against the other team, who wins first. Like,
oh, that's true.
That could be interesting to have like a time pressure. I mean, honestly, some people in playtests have even suggested set an hour clock and hit go.
Oh, see, you know what? That takes it too far for me.
I agree. I would never want to play that version of the game, but I can imagine like the certain group who would, like, after everyone's familiar, like that extra layer of tension might just be one of the most exciting things.
Oh, see, now people are getting silly. I think the S&D mashup is the Tesseract dice getting dropped into the spill. Well, that would be a fourth dimensional nightmare.
A lot more than oil wrecking our seas.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So Terry has clarified. They consider that a Kickstarter exclusive is meaning that it doesn't go to retail. Gotcha. And by that, I think you also mean unless they're a retail backer, because we do have retail backers who can come in as well. And that we do have. So I can tell you that the metallic dice are an exclusive then. The only way to get them is through the campaign, or potentially if we have leftovers at one of our convention booths. But that will not be going into traditional distribution. It's just that I think when people normally say Kickstarter exclusive, sometimes people are very, very definitive and pointed on what that means, and so I err on the more conservative side when I hear that, just to keep things clear. So one Tesseract versus another, kind of like Denise was saying, Chris says, akin to Cabin in the Woods with multiple teams around the world. Okay, yeah. I mean, you could run a number of Tesseracts against each other that way, I guess. Interesting. Lots of interesting ideas, guys. Well, thank you for all that. We've certainly given James a lot to think about.
For sure. I'm still thinking about the 5x5 cube.
Oh, right. That's crazy town.
Yeah.
All right. So so this is the first time that that you signed a game with a publisher. A lot of people out there have, they're looking for their first time as well. They've got great ideas and they're excited either to produce themselves or work with a publisher. Like, do you have any advice for other game designers about like what the process is like, or any insights like how it's been for you? Because this is your first run through. Like, has it been positive? Is there like things they should watch out for? Like what?
I mean, I gotta say it's been pretty much positive from start to finish. As we touched on earlier, like the game design community as a whole, like everywhere I go is just so welcoming, and it runs off of collaboration and like reciprocity. Like, you test other people's games, you share your thoughts, they test your game, they share their thoughts. Like, everyone's kind of part of this really awesome ecosystem where we just help each other. And so I guess advice for starting designers would be, if you can, find other local designers and like meet up, play their games, like talk about game design. Even if you've got nothing that you're working on, seeing the designs that other people are can really help give you a direction. Even just playing published games and talking about them critically. I think all of that can really, be great for someone who's just starting with design. And as far as like publishing goes, I mean, Curt's been great to work with.
Wow.
Like, I mean, like nothing but good things to say. I think it's been, I feel like I got very lucky that like the first pitching event I did, like noticed Tesseract, and it's been smooth sailing from there. But the thing I would say is like, none of that would have happened if I hadn't had people being like, you should just put your game out there, and like feeling like I was at a place where it was cool and other people were enjoying it. So like, I would say don't sit on a good idea. The worst thing a publisher can say is like, that's not for us. Like, you're probably not going to burn any bridges. So like, I would say show your game to people, get other people's thoughts on it, and show it to publishers.
That's a great idea. Yeah. And I think even the speed pitching event was like that. It's even if a publisher says, oh, that's not for us, it's not a reflection on you or your game or anything else. It's just like, was there a connection between those entities? And they all have their own different biases, loves, or like pathways to the future. Like, this represents something that they've been looking to do, where they've or maybe they already kind of did that, but either way right now it's going to work. But it's not about you and your game so much. It's about the fit. And so that can be hard to hear the first time, but take that with the grain of salt. So now, James, you see it coming to life, right? So here it is on Kickstarter and doing pretty well. Talk to me about that experience.
I mean, it's amazing. It's so cool seeing how many people are excited about the game just from like the videos and the playthroughs and the premise. It's incredible. I don't know, I'm so like humbled that people are like supporting it, sharing it, and just excited about the project. So
yeah,
it's been so cool seeing like the production and the prototype, like in all these videos, like people finally playing with it in its final form. It's just
Yeah.
so exciting to see.
That's very gratifying, and I always feel that way too when we get to the end of a project. I mean, that's the goal, is to have people experience your game in the way that you wanted them to enjoy it. And honestly, at, I love doing demos when I'm at conventions, and for some of our games, I've done thousands of what some people would consider very repetitious demoing. But it's always new and fresh for me, because there's the experience that people have, the expressions they have, the enjoyment they have. Like, it's always new and different.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, it's very much the same. But man, that's why I get up in the morning. I love this stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Even like it was so cool at Unpub, the last event we did, where we were both there, two different tables. We had so
Oh, that's
many
right.
people, yeah, like so many people coming by, and it was just like, I think we tested, or I tested Tesseract like 12 times over that weekend. But like each play group like has such a different dynamic and experience with the game. It's like, it was just always so exciting seeing how different people approach the puzzle, and like how the teamwork and the communication worked out. It's really wonderful to see uh, the experience that your game gives to other people. I think that's the most rewarding part of being a game designer, is like giving people this experience.
Yeah, and and I think it's no small thing, by the way, that while every group that comes to your game is having a unique experience, it's also a very carefully crafted experience. That's what the design process is. It's creating these decision funnels that are, even with the randomness, there is a predictable pattern that you're going to see and face people with similar challenges or similar decisions, and the the the, the specifics of that are going to change and be variable. But that's what you're doing as a designer, is you're kind of curating an experience that is repeatable,
Mm-hmm.
so that when you come back to the game, it's still going to be the same game, even if it's going to be a little bit different of a challenge. And that, I think, is the brilliance of game design. And when you see it really gel together well, and both be fresh and consistent at the same time, that's another piece of the magic. So yeah.
Definitely.
All right, so we've got Terry with another great question here. Has the number of Kickstarter backers so far exceeded your expectations, or about what you thought? So where are you at on that?
I mean, I was just excited that we had such a huge inflow of people like on that first day. And then like I've been really amazed that it seems to be growing every day since then. Like I feel like word is spreading, and we've had like a lot of new backers every day. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm impressed. I'm surprised.
Yeah,
It's
and
been
we've
super
we've not
exciting.
had any plateaus.
Yeah.
Every day we've grown. Now, obviously, you always see spikes at the very beginning. You always see spikes at the very end. But what you hope for is that you're going to have a steady climb. Now, I think if this was last year, it
Mm-hmm.
might have been a steeper climb, because this is something that we've been talking with Kickstarter about a little bit too. During COVID, during this time of the year, it didn't see any slowdown. And
Mm.
historically, this time of year hasn't been great, because people are thinking about, oh, I need to save a little money. I've got Christmas coming up. I need to make sure I've got. Um, so this was always, not necessarily the time to launch a campaign. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of that come back now, where, the last 2 years, it hasn't really been the case. Um, but I think I've been delighted to see everyone getting excited about it. I can't believe how many people are going for the metal dice. I when someone first said, oh, would you offer them? I figured, well, all right, I'll offer them. They're going to be stupid expensive, and maybe 5 people will do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here we are. So Chris says we're only like a little over $1,000 away from our next stretch goal. That's great, because we've got another one behind that. So terrific. Well, so boy, we've taken about a little over an hour. It's been a really great conversation. As I'm signing off, if anyone has another burning question, throw it out there, and we'll hit it. But otherwise, James, thanks so much for being here and kind of sharing your thoughts and experiences. I think it's always interesting to talk to the creators of games and get a sense of what went into it. And I don't know, I think the more you know about whether it's a piece of art or something, knowing the process that got that artist there really makes you appreciate the thing more. And so I love hearing designers uh talk about their games, and thank you for doing that and sharing it with everybody.
Yeah, totally. Thanks so much for like giving me the platform and publishing Tesseract and putting all this together. It's been so exciting watching the whole campaign and talking with everyone in the comments. So yeah, thanks for putting this all together.
You got it. Well, we still have another couple days yet, so um, I should. You know what? I would be I would be crazy if I didn't just drop this in here. So I'm gonna do it. Otherwise, at least Johnny will yell at me for not putting the link to the actual Kickstarter in my discussion about it to Kickstarter.
Oh my gosh, spam everyone 3 times.
Woo! So let's see. Last comments coming in. Chris, thanks you for being here. He really enjoyed listening. Brian says thanks. Looking forward to playing the game. Joe, great insights to the process. Can't wait to play. Great. Well, everyone, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And we will see you all next time. So at the next convention or next time we air, we'll say hello again.
Yep.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. All right, we're gonna play me out. Do 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 ba ba do do. You can join in. You know the song. Do 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 ba 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 do 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 ba ba do 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 do.